Do it. Good morning. Can y'all hear me? Good. I am Misty Jones, Director for San Diego Public Library. And I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Good morning, I'm Derek Wolfgram, Director of the Redwood City Public Library, and I'll be talking kind of on behalf of the Peninsula Library System, which is a consortium that Redwood City is part of.
Good morning. I'm Jeanette Contreras, Library Director over at Placentia Library District.
So this morning we're here to talk about last year. Did anybody go to the presentation last year? Okay, yay.
They liked it enough to come back.
That was the purpose, yay. So this year, it's been a year, so there's been some updates and some changes. And so this is just to kind of give you an update of where we all are now in the quest for fine free. So we're going to go super fast through kind of the background of why we eliminated fines. Each one of us are going to talk about our individual experience with that. So for San Diego, ours was one, equity. We found that that patrons in lower socioeconomic areas, underserved communities, were upwards, we probably had close to 40% were barred from using the library because of unpaid fines. So the community that needed us the most were not allowed to use the library because of overdue fines. We also, they're not effective. So I think we've been charging fines for as long as libraries have existed, and people still have overdue fines, so obviously they're not working. It puts a bad image on libraries. For us, it's every time I would get, oh, I work at the public library, I'm the director for the library, they're like, oh my God, I have a fine. You know, I'm so sorry. People think they actually can't come to the library because they have a fine. You have people even in higher, you know, Derek and I were talking last night, you know, wealthy people are so just horrified that they have a library fine that they don't come to the library anymore. And it's against our values, right? Our values are that we want everyone to be able to have access, and then we've created this barrier to access. So do you want to add to that?
Well, for us, it was also kind of taking a look at how we are utilizing staffing level, right? Because we discovered that despite collecting about $35,000 in fines, we're spending about almost $90,000 in staffing to handle the issues and the complaints about fines. So from a standpoint of budget, it made sense to do that. Also, our fine-free policy is for everyone, even adults. It's not just children. So thank you, Darla. I'll give you a 5 later. So what we decided to do is that's the approach we took. So we'll get more into the details later on. But just before I continue, also we are being recorded. So Derek will repeat your question so everybody can hear it. So don't worry if you are soft-spoken. We'll get your questions, okay?
So yeah, in our case with the Peninsula Library System, we did decide to focus on youth. That was kind of the biggest area that we saw cards being blocked. You know, we had tens of thousands of youth who had their cards blocked and were unable to use the library. And also from a financial standpoint, we had several of our, so the Peninsula Library System is the San Mateo County Library and then 7 city libraries, and we all share an ILS and we all share our materials with each other. And so we adopt policies together about how we're going to handle these things. And a couple of the jurisdictions have very conservative city governments that you know, would not be willing to let go of $10,000 in revenue in order to create equitable access to the library for children. They're like, no, but that's $10,000 and we need that. And so we went with the youth fines, one, because it was an area of focus and a strategic priority for us, and 2, because the youth fines only made up about 1/3 to 1/4 of the total fines collected. So for the jurisdictions we needed to convince to let go of the money, it was less money to get them to let go of. So I'm hoping that we'll get to work on adult fines next. The San Mateo County Library System is actually moving ahead with that without the rest of us in the consortium because they have the resources to be able to do that. And the rest of us are hoping that we'll be able to tag along later. One of the notes that's up on the screen is about responsibility. This was one of the big arguments that we heard against why we should get rid of fines, is because fines teach children responsibility, and like that's our job, is to teach children responsibility. Our job is to promote the joy and love of reading and access to information and access to resources and learning, and it's not up to us. You know, I've said kind of jokingly, half jokingly to a couple people, you know, if a parent wants to charge their kids fines because they haven't returned their books on time, they're welcome to do that.
It might make more sense. At least they'll get to keep the money. And ours was, like Jeanette, we went fine-free in July for all patrons. And ours was actually a little bit higher revenue give up. We brought in about $600,000 in fines a year, but it cost us $1.3 million to collect them. So really, that was our strategic. We looked at it from an equity standpoint. We looked at it from the return on investment. We looked at it from, you know, the values, the effectiveness, and it was almost like we created an argument that no one could poke holes in. So.
Though they do try.
They try, yes, which is the second part on here. So convincing the stakeholders is making sure that you're speaking the right language to the right person. If you have your fiscally conservative people, you talk about your, you know, that it's not a good return on investment. I actually had a politician go on the radio and talk about what a horrible library director I was because we were allowing it to just be the wild, wild west, and you know, no one would ever bring their books back anymore. And even your staff are probably going to be your haters too. You have staff that dig in and don't want and think that it's our job to punish people for not bringing their books back on time. So you have to tackle that as well. And like Derek said, it's the parents that are like, well, how am I going to teach my kids responsibility? And it's like, it's not our job to teach your kids responsibility. That's called parenting. So it is, it's difficult to get everybody on board. But if you know what argument you need to make to who, then it's a little easier. And sorry, I have to stand over here because I have to do the slides and they stand over there. So you've eliminated fines. So now what's the next step? And I really naively thought it would be like fines one day, no fines the next day. Yeah, that easy. And it's not, it's not that easy. You have to develop your policy. So your policy is going to change. What are you going to do about your existing fines? The people who already have fines, are you going to wipe them clean? Are you going to keep charging, make them responsible for the fines that they had outstanding? What are your loan periods? Are they going to stay the same? We did automatic renewal, so we have 5 automatic renewals, which also helped with our revenue. So it was really an even bigger because our revenue went down. So are you going to do automatic renewal? Or are you just going to let them, are you going to have a cutoff point as to how many days past being overdue? Are you going to charge them for the book? Are you going to allow them to still bring it back and eliminate the fine? Are you going to turn them over to collections? So you have to think about all of those different types. What do you do with lost and damaged items? You still charge them for those. How long do you give them to pay for those items? And then, are you going to send people to collections? The city of San Diego has an internal collections department. So our city treasurer is collections. And in order to get the city executive team and the chief financial officer and the treasurer's department on board with this, we had to draw a line in the sand and say, you have until this time period to bring it back. If you don't, then you've purchased it. And then if you don't pay for it, then we're sending you to collections. So that was one of the things that we really had to kind of give up in order to eliminate the overdue fines. But we had to make sure, because they were big on how do you hold people accountable. So
Well, I think that is one of the misconceptions, that when you're in the kind of convincing stage that, the wild, wild west thing, that there's no accountability at all. I don't know of any library that has also done away with lost and replacement fees at the same time they've done away with overdue fines. There is a hook that people need to bring the materials back. In our case, we were fortunate that we were able to make the decision without any sort of financial oversight that was going to stop us, that we could waive the existing fines, that were already accrued. And one of the things, I don't remember whether we put in here, one of the policy issues that actually one of the really interesting things to think about is whether, if you're doing this for youth, for example, there are libraries that do it by item type and there are libraries that do it by card type. We chose to do it by card type, so that anything that children or teens checked out would be free of fines. We know that creates a loophole. We know that creates an opportunity for parents to use their kid's card to check out things and not get fines, and we don't care. I mean, we, ultimately, that's a side benefit for those people, and maybe for us as we move towards wanting to get rid of adult fines, that adults already, scheming, crafty adults already have a way that they can get out of paying their fines by having children and then using their cards to check things out. One other policy issue that came up for us along the way that we needed to make a shift was, we originally did this for kids and teens, so we did it up through age 17. But we have, in addition to the 8 library jurisdictions that are in our consortium, we also have 3 community colleges that are part of the consortium, and that was creating inequity within the community college community. And so they came back to the board and asked if we could include 18 and 19-year-olds in this as well. And so we did. So we waived the existing fines, and so our youth goes all the way up to age 19 now.
When we started, the idea was, it was a service. We wanted to be the library that had no barriers or had no hindrance in terms of having the kids and also adults come in and utilize our resources. So when we approached the board with it, before we even approached the board, we gather input from our staff. We had a couple of staff meetings and asked for their input and what have you. And initially it was great, but once you start implementing, that's a different thing. But it required a lot of spending time and training with your staff as well. Our board was all for it. We had no reluctance from any of our board member. There was no concern. Once we started the policy in July of last year, but we didn't do an actual launch until October, when Officer Francis came out and all the publicity came out. We have, by the way, there are T-shirts and everything that's in the back there. You're welcome to take that with you. And if anybody wants Officer Francis, you can travel with him. We're not going to take him back. So, and then you can just cover our logo and put your logo on there. So for the loan period, we decided to not change the loan period. We kept it as is. And then anybody with existing accounts that have overdue fines, they all got waived. It was a clean slate. We didn't want to have to deal with who gets what, how much, and all that. Just, it's much, otherwise that $98,000 for staff, it's going to go up, right? So it's better to just have a clean slate for us. And then with regards to the lost damage items, that is still in their account. It's only the overdue fines, fines that we waive, and that's it. And then we're looking at auto renewal that would help with this policy a lot. So if you're considering this, it kind of goes hand in hand. So think about that. For us, is that they have till 90 days, and then it automatically goes to collection. And then once they go into collection, our staff, our clerks are right there up in the front. Yay, thanks to them for doing all that work. Once they go in collection, the staff prints out a report, and they actually call each and every patient that's on that report to remind them to bring the item back. And then we don't waive the collection fee, because again, that's passed through to us, so we can't do that. But we will waive the $10 lost item fee. fee. So we are trying to make it as easy as they can to come and utilize the services. But so the collection, we don't
It's
have the luxury of
necessary,
it
yeah.
internal, but it is a necessary thing.
Oh, it's not a luxury.
No, it's not. And talking about responsibility, it's the responsibility for the adults.
Yeah.
This is their responsibility getting back. So.
We did not waive existing fines. We did work with the Treasurer's Department to basically purge anything that was over 5 years old. And we did that as kind of just, we're cleaning up our records, you know. And then we got permission to do that on a rolling basis. So we only keep 5 years at any time. So my thing is, in 5 years, no one will have any outstanding fines. So there you go. And Jeanette kind of touched on this, and so did Derek, but it's how do you get it out, and what do you need to make sure that your staff have? And these are two of the things. Placentia did their policy FAQs, and we did as well, and I'm sure you have it. But it's make it as easy as possible for the public to understand exactly what's going to happen. So no guesses on when they're going to be charged for that item and when they're going to end up in collections. And we actually did, like, at 1 day, you're overdue. At 7 days, you're going to get a notice. At 14 days, you're going to get another notice. At 30 days, you're going to be charged for the item. 60 days, you're going to be invoiced and you bought it, right? You can't return it at that point. So we tried to do it really easy. We put it on our self-checks. We put it, we plastered it everywhere just to make sure that people knew exactly what was going to happen and there's no guessing. So, absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
But this is after their 5 automatic renewals?
After their 5 automatic renewals. So they get 5 if they're eligible. So, I mean, if you think about with our policy, I mean, you can keep something like 250 days before you're going to be charged for it. So, I mean, it's a very liberal policy.
Yeah, I would just add, in addition to kind of the print publicity and putting it on the self-checks, the other thing that we did was we actually, for those customers we had an email for, we actually contacted the people whose cards were formerly blocked and were not going to be anymore directly, and just let them know, hey, welcome back. We'd like to have you come back.
For our system, we share an ILS with the city of Anaheim. So we did have to meet with the city of Anaheim to address some of the internal issues in terms of, well, if they check out our item and your item with the Anaheim Library card, will they get overdue fines and what have you? So what it took us a couple meetings to meet with Anaheim folks to address some of those issues, and then for our staff also to take it back and say, I don't think that will work, but if you're curious about how that works, we did it by agency ownership. So regardless if they have an Anaheim Library card or a Placentia Library card, if they borrow our item and it's overdue, they won't get fined for that. But if they use our Placentia Library card and they borrow Anaheim's time, they still get charged for that. Yes, there's some confusion initially, and but then people, we heard it from a couple of patrons, okay, well, I'm not using my Anaheim Library card. No, we want you to use the Anaheim Library card. You'll get more material resources access to you, available to you. So that's what we did with Anaheim, and I think and we'll start talking about the training, but it's key is training with your staff. And there's going to be initial frustration, so, I mean.
Well, and if you're the library that got rid of fines and not the library that didn't get rid of fines, people are going to be really happy with you.
Yeah.
The complaints are going to go to the ones. So I'm sure that Anaheim has gotten some pressure from their community to follow suit now.
Audrey's not here.
I will say this about the 1 day. What we did too is that whenever something is 1 day late, their card is basically blocked. Like they can't renew any items, they can't check out anything else until they return that item. So that was one way to kind of not, and we did that because we didn't want staggered stuff and them going to collections several times for things. So we put a kind of make them come back before they can do anything else. I actually did have one lady send me a comment card, though, that said, will you please reinstate fines so that I can pick up my holds if my stuff is overdue? I was like, and you would be the only one who wants that.
I just like Misty and Derek, though. I think one of what we heard from our end was, well, how are you going to make up that revenue? How are you going to get your $35,000 or $45,000 back? And our answer is, well, because we're providing better service, our staff is able to focus on programs, able to focus on dealing with the other services that you want, because also we're spending about $90,000 on staffing, so it didn't make sense. They said, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden it's like $35,000 versus $90,000, so it didn't make sense. So.
Yeah, no, Misty didn't get to cut $1.3 million from her
Yes.
budget. She just had $1.3 million worth of staff time that could be used for things that make people happy.
Yes, exactly.
Or
Now, I will
happier.
say I did have to give up some hourly positions, but they were vacant positions. So that was a little bit of a trade-off, but we ended up actually only cutting about $300,000. So I felt like we pulled one over on them. It was kind of like after it happened, I was like, I can't believe we got away with that. So for your staff, so it's making sure that your staff knows exactly what's happening. And for us, it was expect the unexpected, because there will be questions or things that come up that you're like, I did not even think about that. But make sure they have talking points, because they're going to get the people who are thrilled, but they're also going to get the people who are like, why are you doing this? Why are you, you're not teaching my kid responsibility. Why are you doing this? And so make sure they have the talking points as to why you made the decision. Make sure they know and understand the new policy, that they know exactly what's going to happen, that they know at day one that they can't use their card anymore unless they bring the item back, that they know what happens 30 days when somebody brings the invoice in, they know why they got that invoice and what to do with it. And then give them some wiggle room. That was the biggest thing that we did, was let them initially override for the person who can't can't check out their hold because their item is overdue, because it's going to take some time for the public to be able to learn the policy and know what's going on. It's a big change. So give permission for the staff to kind of wiggle. On that same note, let them know when it's time to stop wiggling, And that was, because our overrides went up 600% in the first month. And then after that, it was like, okay, stop. Listen to their feedback, because they're getting, all the little things that happen initially, all the stuff that's, and really listen and take it to heart, and then make sure they have those FAQs. And it's not just it's the frequently asked questions and the not so frequently asked questions. Anticipate what it is that you think that is going to happen, so that they know exactly what to do.
Use your FAQ as the script for your staff. It's basically what it is, because your staff develop those FAQs. So they'll be able to relate and answer it genuinely with knowledge. And then the other thing for me is, we got somebody we waive for $7, right? And then we have somebody who we waive $200, and so it's like they're not going to come and go, there you go, you can have it back. They're happy, they're thankful for that. And I mean, we had it was one college student. He was so thrilled. He's like, yes. And then it was only $17, but $17 for a college student's probably a latte from Starbucks, right? Yeah. Whatever. So they're happy with that.
It's a meal of 4 in some communities too.
Yeah.
So. So the publicity that we did, like Jeanette said, she's got some stuff in the back of the publicity that they did. Our public information officer did a ton of these that we put on self-checks and plastered everywhere, that were all different things, like take a hike, you're
Buzz
out of
off.
here. She just did probably 15 different graphics of, and just put them everywhere. I tried to get her the one that said, "We're so fine, we don't need yours," but
Should have done that one.
they didn't do that one. That was the internal one. Derek had a really great with the, and I'm sorry, but I couldn't get the picture
No worries.
to load, to put on here, but with kids reading books. And then the, no more late fees.
Right,
I
and just
mean,
put it
tug
on
at
social
those.
media, put it in
Yeah.
our email newsletters, kind of splashed it
Yeah.
everywhere to reinforce that this is about kids reading. That's
Yeah.
the whole reason we're doing this, is kids reading.
Yeah, it's tug at those heartstrings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we did ours with like the credit card holder for the back of your phone. So you save your money, you just put your cash in there, right? So those are all
Oh,
there. So
nice.
ours was like, don't pay. We don't care. We just want the item back.
Yeah.
And that's essentially it. So.
So now the statistics, what we found out. So like I said, we started in July. So we're just kind of getting some of our initial statistics. So as you can see, the bills paid has actually decreased, and obviously because there's not as many bills. So we've had less bills that have been paid. We've had less bills that have been issued. So people are not, we just are now getting to this where people, if they don't return it and they've had the 5 renewals, are gonna get invoiced. We have 350, 400,000 card holders, and we've invoiced 90 people. I mean, really, so we've had 90 people, and it's an average of like $50. So I mean, it's not, it's just not a lot. It's such a small percentage of the people that really are not bringing their items back. And then, again, down here, like the total amount billed has decreased. It actually increased a little bit at the end, but I think that's because when people are not returning the items, they're actually going to get a bill for it, where before you really didn't get a bill. You got blocked at $50 and you can't use your card, but we didn't send you an invoice. We didn't send you a bill for your items, and now they're getting a bill. But this is what I like, is that people are renewing their privileges. So we're starting to see that rise. So we're getting, and my ILS person is like, well, people could just be, renewing their privilege. I'm not, no, they're not. They're doing it because we don't have fines. But, so like I said, we've only, not even 6 months. So we're just starting to get what the real impact is. But these guys have a year's worth. So, Jeanette.
Okay, for us, we saw some decreases in numbers, in particular their new patron registration or adult circulation overall. It took a dip, but it was only like average 5% dip. So it's not, we anticipated that, right? And then the other thing for us was the average number of transaction that we had to deal with money-wise. It took a dive. I mean, it went down 80%, and that probably equals to about $70,000 in staffing time, right? That can be refocused on other service for our community. And then the one for us is total money collected. We knew that was going to take a big dip, and we didn't expect to recover that at all. And that was, we're still getting collecting money for replacements, though, through the other fees that we have. And then the items for not returned, the items sent to not returned to lost items did go up. You can see it went from 195 to 824. So that is a big hit. But then again, once we have the loss report, the staff then takes the initiative. They call each and every patient that's on that report to remind them to bring back, because we just want the item. We don't want your money. So we would like it, but this is a better model. And so, and then the number of items lost, again, that were not returned. People thought that because they don't have fines, they get to keep the items forever. So we said, no, you actually have to bring them back. And so I know once we do the auto renewal, they'll get a reminder that if somebody's requesting that item, they need to bring it back. So we do want them to bring it back. They said, oh, I thought we get to keep this. And I said, no, well, you'll get your notice. And then once you get your the $25 loss, we can't waive that either. So make sure you just bring it back. So we did see that, but the staff's been really wonderful in handling all that. They do listen. They still waive for certain situations where they have the power to do that. They don't need to ask their supervisor, the manager, or I to make that decision for them. For us, ultimately, it's customer service. That's all that it is for us. And in our little town of 55,000 and working with Anaheim, that's what we want to focus on. And we have such a strong relationship with our school district that we spoke about this and we met with the superintendent. They were really thrilled, beyond belief, the principals especially. Oh, now we can take our students to the library. Now we can have them have library cards. So.
Derek?
So we have a few of the outcomes I wanted to share from the Peninsula Library System. You can see with the lower light blue bar was the youth fines, which you can see over the period of a few years before we got rid of those fines was declining anyway. We were down to 72,000 items, or $72,000 that were owed in fines or collected in fines the year before we implemented the policy. And then the darker blue bar are the adult portion of the fines, which you can see is continuing to go down. Whether or not we're eliminating fines, we're still not collecting that much. I mean, this is an entire county's worth of public libraries and community colleges, and it's only generating $300,000 in overdue fines. So the evidence will be there soon to eliminate adult fines, I think, especially after we implement auto renewal later this year. That's going to keep us moving forward with that slow decline. This is something else we wanted to highlight. The light blue bars at the top are adult library card registrations. You can see those have been relatively stable, kind of up and down a little bit over the year before we implemented the fine-free policy for youth and the 2 years after. For youth, on the other hand, we went from 9,800 new registrations for youth the year before we did this to over 20,000 2 years after we did this. So that's not entirely due to the fine-free policy. You know, we've been working with the student success cards. We've been doing a lot of things that are designed to get library cards in the hands of our youth, but it certainly has been helpful to be able to encourage people to get those cards and use those cards knowing that kids aren't going to have to pay fines. And then finally, I talked about the reasons that one of the reasons we wanted to do this was to eliminate as many of the blocked cards as we could. And even as the total number of cards that we have issued to youth has gone up and up and up, the number and percentage of cards that are blocked has gone down and down and down. We still have some people that are blocked because they have items that are lost or damaged that haven't been returned and haven't been paid for. So we haven't totally solved the issue of making sure we have access for all the youth in the community, but we've just about cut the number of blocked cards in half, largely due to this policy. So we're very excited about that.
All right, so as you can see, overdues were so last season. And you're free to go with Francis.
With
So
Francis.
now we'll open it up. I think we've got about 10 minutes for questions.
Yes.
What are some, I understand like, staff time at the desk to collect fines and fees. What are some of the other elements that go into your calculation of how much money you save from not charging?
This will be a great one for Misty. The question was, what are all of the costs that go into that 1.3 million? You know, there is the staff savings of time at the desk, but what are the other factors that contribute to the cost of collecting fines?
Yes. So we did a really in-depth analysis, and I'm happy to share that with anybody. We took we actually took the lowest level person who works the desk, and we estimated that you spend 1 minute per transaction, which we know is very, very conservative, because you can spend 15 minutes with someone who has a 30-cent fine. And we calculated out the number of transactions that we have and what that cost is. But we also took into account that the armored car service that you have to come and pick up your cash, the business office who gets the fines and they have to reconcile that, the deposits that have to be done daily by the staff in the morning and at night because they're collecting that money, the supplies, deposit slips, the bags that we did everything that you could possibly think of. We actually did outside departments and looked at, the treasurer's department and how does it impact them? How does it, when they have to reconcile then the bank statement with what our deposit is. And so we tried to think of every single person that touched that fine from the time that it was paid.
Anything else?
I think we looked at all this, but the only number we did look at, quite honestly, was the staffing. But Misty does have a point. So when you're looking at that and presenting your numbers to your elected officials, yes, it's the light that's on, it's the printing that you have to do, it's the phone call, it's the email, all that. Like you say, everyone that touches that transaction is a cost to that transaction. So.
Yes.
Is there any difference in the Peninsula Library System as far as the impact of the public libraries versus the community colleges? Because I'm from a community college that's considering removing.
Oh, so the question is, was there any difference for the community colleges versus the public libraries? I actually haven't really looked at that in great depth. I mean, I know that the whole thing was resonating with the staff at the community colleges because they came back to us with that question about can we eliminate the fines for the 18 and 19-year-olds? Like they were noticing that the 17-year-olds were getting their fines taken care of. So if you want to follow up with me afterwards, I can certainly look into that data because I have the breakdowns by jurisdiction, but I've just kind of lumped everything together for purposes of this presentation. Thanks. Darla?
You guys mentioned the automatic renewal. I think I know what system you are, but what ILS are you on?
So the question was for systems that are implementing auto renewal, what ILS are you using?
We use Cersei Dynex. Yeah. Yeah.
And we use Sierra from Innovative.
We're with Cersei also.
Yeah. And also, what we did was I just told the executive team of the city that Cersei just turned it on.
It's
Yeah.
true, they did.
They did. They made it possible for us to do it. So we did. So they turned it on, and we did see when we did automatic, we did 5 automatic renewals, and we saw our revenue in 1 year drop from $600,000 to a little under $300,000.
Makes your CERC go up too. Yes.
So that was my question, does your circle go up with automatic renewals? Because I
Yes.
increased the number of renewals and we thought our circle was going down because people were keeping things on.
So the question was, what happens to your circulation statistics as a result of automatic renewals?
Our circulation's just, it's gone up. Yeah. It's actually gone up last year. It went up about 6%. So,
Dan?
Yes.
In your FAQs and your talking points for your staff, how detailed have you had to be about what staff will be doing with the extra time?
So the question was for the FAQs and the talking points, how detailed do you have to be about what staff is going to be doing with all that extra time they got back?
Well,
Jeanette?
when we developed the FAQ, we also talked about, okay, now that you guys have extra time, what do you plan to do? So they do have lay out a plan in terms of with their managers, what they'll be doing. For us, it was focusing more on the outward the Harwood approach in sending our staff out there, connecting, being connectors, community connectors for the library and other resources within, because we're a special district, so we're not part of the county nor the city. So we really have to reach out to the city folks, reach out to the school district or chamber and what have you. So that's what we're doing more of. And they have more time to plan for their program as well. And it's not like, oh, okay, let's just take that glue that we have or the die cut and let's do that program again. So it's more of that. And then I'm getting the staff more involved with budget preparation. So we have that for them to do as well. So they're still asking for more time though, so.
We did, we had a few things that happened or in kind of sequential order. So we did a big RFID project where we converted all of our libraries to RFID and did self-check machines. And then we did a staffing study, and this was precipitated by a performance audit from the city auditor. So we had to do a staffing study and come up with a staffing model. And then we took with the fine elimination. So we are actually in the middle of looking at the service levels and the, what type of programming is going on, what the circulation is, what the self-check circulation is, how much money do they bring in, all that kind of stuff. And we're reallocating staff for that to different locations. Because the one thing that you always get is we don't have enough staff, right? Still, you take away some things and we're really bare bones on staffing anyway. But we have been, I do have some branches now that are able to not even have anybody at the desk. So,
Yeah, and I would say for us, similar. I mean, the staff who are impacted are primarily the staff who work at the circulation desk, who are the same staff that do all of our cataloging and processing work. And so for them, it was a matter of, they've never had enough time to get to some projects that now they're going to have time to get to. And we didn't really have the public kind of dig in on that question too deeply in any of the conversations that I'm aware of.
and we also just enabled credit card payment on our self-checks. So we're able to accept credit cards on the self-checks, and we're waiting to see how big of a difference that makes.
Yes.
Now, you had to drop some staffing hours for at your library. Do you have to do that
No, our
So
staffing
the
level.
question was about, did Misty had to eliminate some of her hourly staff? Did the other jurisdictions have to reduce staff as a result of this?
Our staffing level remained the same. We did not.
Yeah, same for us. We did not, the fact that our fine revenues went down, the city did not make us take that out of our expenditures.
A caveat, I probably would have had to eliminate anyway because it was a budget cut year. So we were tasked with a 2.5% cut anyway. So
related to that? Was your RFID processing, was that part of the cut with your staff?
Question was the RFID and the self-check part of the cost reduction plan?
yes.
Sean?
You might have said this, but your collections, so for your lost items, do you have a collection agency? Did you keep that, or are you considering getting rid of that?
So the question was about collection agency and how Peninsula Library System handles that. We do work with a collection agency. However, we do not send people to have things on their credit report. Our collection agency sends very, very stern letters. Oh, they're so stern. And we made a policy decision a few years back that we were not going to do the punitive measure, that we were just going to send people increasingly stern letters. In the
We're
back.
still with unique management. We still have that.
Yeah, us too.
So we implemented in July as well at my library.
Congratulations.
And I'm really looking for a metric to normalize the increase that we see in the short term in overdues, for short-term overdues, not those long-term dues that go and go. Do you have a number of, both libraries experience X% increase in short-term overdue materials initially?
So the question is from a library that's just implemented this in July, wondering if there's kind of a baseline measurement of how many short-term overdues libraries can expect to experience during the transition. I haven't looked at that number
We
myself.
haven't looked at that. Ours with automatic renewal, that's the it's kind of, we're finding that people are usually bringing it back before that 5th automatic renewal. What happens with ours is, at 30 days, it's marked long overdue. So we can do a metric for what people are holding out past 30 days. And we have seen that go up, but we have seen less people actually be invoiced for it. So once they're getting that, you know, you're gonna have to pay for this, they bring it back, so.
We haven't looked at that either, but it's a great question
It's a
for
great
us to look
question. We
into.
can-
Yes. uh-huh.
Yeah, and a follow-up?
I think we
Oh,
have
go
one
ahead.
more minute, so.
Okay.
I just want to share that at this meeting last year, you talked about a guilty conscience jar. And you
Ah.
implemented that as well.
Nice.
That goes to like our foundation group, and that's gone up 400%.
Wow.
All right. So for the recording, that person, that library implemented a guilty conscience jar, so people could pay whatever they wanted since they didn't have to pay fines anymore. Money goes to their library foundation, and the receipts went up by 400%. We had one last question over this way.
I was
Randy.
just wondering, so the books that you invoice, let's say they get that invoice, can they still bring the book back and not get? Okay.
Yeah,
So the question was about if once people are invoiced for books that have gone to long overdue or lost status, can they actually bring the book back?
yeah, so the way that ours works is once they have 30 days and they get the ILS bill, right, from your ILS, then they have 30 additional days to bring it back. But when they get the invoice, which is an SAP invoice from the city, they own it, right? They've got to pay for it. So that's they don't get a collection fee yet. They have another 30 days to pay for it. If they don't pay for it, then they go to collections. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Ours is, after 90 days, they do go to collection, and we do waive the lost, and we waive the fines, overdue fines, but not the collection. That's, again, passed through to us by Unique.
So when you say we waive the loss, that's like the processing fee
Correct,
that's
correct.
associated with it, but not
Correct.
the cost of the item.
Not, no, the cost of the items is also waived, but it's just the Unique, the $25 that we get charged,
it.
that gets through them.
So, out of respect for people's time, we do want to wrap up. We thank you for being here today. We can hang around for a few minutes if you have additional questions you'd like to ask us, and good luck getting
If
to be
anybody
fine-free.
wants Officer Francis, feel free to.
Officer Francis is looking for a ride.